Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Michael Whitman, and you're listening to The Shrink in Beverly Hills. And today I have a special guest, which is Trina Chan. How you doing today?
Oh, well, thanks. Thanks for
Good.
having me.
Trina is a therapist for a long time. She's been in our group, and today we're just going to chat about various topics. We were thinking about talking about people pleasing because that's been a topic that's been coming up in my work and probably yours. So, why don't we start though by letting people get to know you a little bit, Trina? Like, where are you from? How did you decide to become a therapist? Are you a people pleaser like some therapists are, such as me? Recovering people pleaser.
Sure. Yeah, so I grew up in Hong Kong actually, and spent about 18 years there and went to university in the UK. So I went to Cambridge and did my first degree in English, drama, and education studies. So my background was very much in the arts. Was always very interested in, well, I did a lot of theater. That was just my passion from a very young age. And what I loved about it was really just being able to delve into the psyche of different characters and understanding their motivations for doing certain things and really bringing a character to life. Um, it was also a platform to kind of express myself in a safe way. So I was a shy kid with big feelings, and I found the arts as a way to really express myself freely.
Oh,
And so, yeah, so I moved to LA in 2013. I did a year of method acting at the Lee Strasberg Theater and Film Institute. And
that's
while I,
famous. Yeah.
yeah.
I was Cambridge. Yeah.
um, and yeah, while I was there, I became really fascinated with the mind body connection. Um, we did sense memory work and relaxation exercises, and it was really interesting to see people have kind of different emotional responses as they were loosening their muscles or recreating or yeah, certain memories. And
Mm.
I was also going through some interesting experiences at the time and ultimately wanted to find a way to better understand myself and others better and to have the tools to directly help others as well. So that's how I got into, um, well, that's how I decided to do my master's in clinical psych. And
Mm.
yeah, 12 years later, I'm here
Wow.
and been practicing for over 10 years now.
Wow. So you're an old school vet in therapy. So I was curious a little before we get into that. What was Cambridge like for you? And it's got quite a reputation. I know it's been there for like over 1,000 years or something. And
Mm,
I've never been to England, but I've looked at some pictures of some of those old universities like Cambridge.
yeah, definitely a lot of character and a lot of history. It was a great experience. I mean, in terms of the education there, it really definitely felt very inspired.
Yeah.
It really like inculcated a desire for, I guess, lifelong learning. In that sense, the professors were very, um, I mean, just learned so much from all of them.
Uh-huh.
It was very intense, though. There
It
was a
was.
lot of essays to write and dissertations, and so I definitely put a lot of pressure on myself. I
Mm.
think I certainly stepped in with a bit of imposter syndrome, wondering whether, they made a mistake that I had put in. But
Yeah.
I ended up, yeah, I worked hard and did well, and
Yeah.
it was a good experience.
Yeah. You would recommend Cambridge if somebody gets accepted. I'm sure the acceptance rate is quite low, but if someone gets accepted to go for it, huh?
I would,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So, well, that's good. And so why don't we get to people pleasing? Because we were
Mhm.
talking about that the other day. And my theory is that some therapists are people pleasers
Mhm.
because I think of people pleasers as being interested in helping people. So that's a good quality for a therapist, or else we shouldn't be doing this. Cooperative, agreeable, and there's some good qualities to being a people pleaser. Obviously, there's some ones that are not so helpful, like sacrificing oneself. And I like the concept of exploding doormat, where
Mhm.
you kind of take it and take it and take it, and then boom,
Yeah.
you erupt in anger instead of being assertive along the way.
Mhm.
So it's something that I think we can really help people in therapy because you can help people with assertiveness and being aware of when they're squelching themselves. And how have you seen, people pleasing come up in your own life or in your patients' lives, or what are your thoughts on it?
Sure, I would say I'm also a recovering people pleaser, and I do see that a lot of people pleasers that drawn to this profession in terms of kind of helping and giving and caretaking.
Right.
Um, and I've certainly worked with several clients who also struggled with people pleasing tendencies, and um, so definitely seen it. I think it's quite common
Mhm.
actually, and very interesting to better understand. I think just in terms of people pleasing as like an adaptive strategy or
Right.
kind of a defense response to a type of trauma.
Mm,
And
right.
I think it's interesting to also look at some misconceptions about people pleasing. The idea that sometimes, people might see it as, oh, it's just about being like completely selfless um, or just like fully submitting or, when actually a lot of the times it's a sense of, okay, it's an attempt to create a sense of safety.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Right. I think that's a good way to conceptualize it.
mm,
And if you combine that what you said about the trauma, that makes sense to me. If there's a little kid and there's too much aggression in the family, such as violence, yelling, abuse, or even just neglect, not saying just neglect, but even neglect,
mm,
um, the kid may try to become a people pleaser, too much to
yeah,
get validation and love that's not there in enough doses.
right,
And then that becomes a way of staying safe. If I don't make any waves, maybe there won't be any problems tonight, for example.
right.
Then they take that into adulthood, and kind of when it's less adaptive, even they're kind of getting more problems for being a people pleaser. And
Right.
what are some problems you've seen with people being a people pleaser in adult life, for example?
I think in many ways it can feel, I mean, like short term, it can be helpful. And I think if there is like a threat, for example, or, a need to please in order to feel safe in the moment, I can see how that
Hmm.
could help. But long term, it can be very detrimental.
Yeah.
And in terms of some kind of issues that arise, I think people can feel kind of stuck in that habitual, um, the sense of habitually kind of people pleasing and suppressing or ignoring their own needs and prioritizing another
Right.
at all time. I mean, often.
Right.
And then, like you said, kind of it can build up and there can be accumulated uh, rage or
Right.
resentment, and it can feel very depleting rather than energizing. And
Yeah.
over time, um, we can feel quite isolated, I think, from ourselves and from others, even though it feels like it's a way to maintain connection. We can end up feeling more disconnected and not truly kind of understood or seen or for who we are because we've kind of abandoned ourselves in order to meet the needs of others. Um,
Well, yeah, I agree with all that. And another problem with it is there can be something manipulative or disingenuous about it, and so that can actually adversely affect relationships in the long term.
mm,
So let's say you and I are friends and I'm trying to people please you, then it may be that there's some sense you have that this isn't really about a connection we're having, it's about me trying to get something from you,
right.
and that can be very off-putting in relationships because it's not an authentic connection often.
Mm,
So, there is an idea that women may put other people's before them more than men, and that has like a biological like substrate.
mm,
So if a woman has an infant and she has to be very focused and attuned to the infant's needs so the infant survives, and reading the infant's behaviors and emotions, and so on and so on. So women probably have it more than men, although men can be people pleasers too, like I'm covering one. So so there's that. That's when it's an adaptive thing because you really in that first couple of years, the infant is helpless. So the caretaker needs to sort of be a people pleaser. So there's that adaptive function of it. So there is a kind of a way to put it of it's not people pleasing, but I call it like pleasing to be around, and that's more authentic. And that's like somebody who, spends time with somebody because they want to, not to avoid conflict, not to manipulate, not to get something,
Right.
but because they want to, and you know that that person's with you because they've made the time and want to see you.
Yeah.
So that's pleasing. Somebody they have put themselves at a high priority. They take care of their needs too. So and they won't use that later. That that I drove all the way here to see you. And I was tired and so that can have that holding over someone's head. I did that favor for you. That's sometimes people pleasers can have it as ammunition later.
Mm. So true. I think that makes a lot of sense in terms of this idea of, okay, are we people pleasing as like a habitual way of just saying yes and not even being that conscious of it, in order to avoid disappointing another and avoid rejection? Or is it like a thoughtful sense of, oh, okay, I'm saying yes because this is meaningful to me, or this is what I want to do?
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, there's a book on there called No More Mr. Nice Guy, and it's another way of kind of conceptualizing this that a lot of men have become too much of people pleasers, and then they erupt, out of frustration or resentment. And so they take a girl out or they meet a girl and they're being really a nice guy. So maybe they can get what they want sexually or time wise. And the girl can sense that there's something about the guy not being grounded in his self and masculinity, but trying to read her and give her anything she wants,
right.
which can kind of be, I would think, off putting.
Sure, sure. This sense of I can be who you want me to be in order to, as long as you love me, or I feel safe. Um, I also think about this. It was similar to what you mentioned earlier about.
Can't
Um,
continue.
yeah, it was similar to what you mentioned earlier about this. It's almost like a this unconscious kind of covert contract in a way of, okay, well, uh, I'll give you whatever you want, or I'll please you, and so on. But I'm also somewhat kind of hoping that you'll anticipate my needs and you'll kind of meet those needs. But
Mhm.
it often doesn't work out because it's not directly expressed, and then it's built up resentment, and then it can lead to like passive aggressiveness or kind of different ways of interacting that aren't really going to be helpful.
Well, yeah, it kind of reminds me of keeping score.
Mhm.
Like I did you these favors. I picked you up from the airport. Now it's your turn to do this for me. So that's not very genuine. That's sort of trying to get what I want by, working it. So, that's a problem. And I also was curious about your background being Asian female, and there's stereotypes about Asian females being submissive.
Mm.
And so that to me, a submissive wife, for example, or girlfriend is very people pleasing.
Mhm.
And do you think that still exists in Asian culture, or is it more of a overblown stereotype now?
Well, I think it's interesting because when we think about culture, it's a lot of as people please can get praised a lot of the time, right? Because it's often rewarded by like the culture at large.
Thinking of like the teacher's pet in school.
Right, or like, oh, you're the good kid, you're obedient, and so you get rewards for that. Or even as adults or in the workplace, right? It's this idea of, oh, you're nice, you're polite, or
Employee of the month, did
yeah,
everything after you, and then some.
exactly. Or yeah, exactly. Took the initiative to do something, or great team player, kind of easy
Right.
to get along with.
Customer service.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you add on kind of the like certain cultural elements of Asian culture, right? Or thinking about this idea of, like with Chinese um, culture, this idea of, well, we need to respect our elders. We don't talk back or challenge authority. We don't, you know, air our dirty laundry in public.
Right.
And it's all about like not bringing shame onto the family, or kind of keeping faith. So then um, the combination, and women tend to be more agreeable, agreeable, studies seem to show that than men.
Mhm.
So I think the combination, um, mm, if you're talking about Asian
Mhm.
women, and so I can, yeah, that makes sense in terms of like a stereotype, I
Yeah.
suppose. But there's a lot
Have you
there.
have you read Malcolm Gladwell?
Bits
There's
and
a
pieces.
one of his big books is Outliers,
Yeah.
and he shows a study of Korean Airlines. Do you happen to remember that? I can describe it because I've given it some thought
Sure.
recently, which is Korean Airlines was having lots of problems with crashes, plane
Mm.
crashes. And they were trying to understand why. The technology is good, everybody is working hard, what's going on here? They found that there was too much submissiveness to authority, like telling the pilot he made a mistake with this part of the mechanical part or this part of the engine because they didn't want to be a bad employee. So they were people pleasing so much that it was causing more accidents. And so what they did was they retrained everybody on how to communicate, even to authority when you disagree or when you point something out they did wrong. Like you made a mistake here, that can't work in the plane. But you can say it in a way where the authority or your superior could hear it, like in a respectful way. What we call in psychology assertive communication. I statements. I notice that this isn't correct here, rather than you always mess this up, boss.
Right.
That's a you statement. So when they did that, like the crashes like went way, way down, like virtually disappeared.
Oh,
And so it was all about this problem of it's good to respect authority, but it was overdone
mm,
so that they were kind of over people pleasing. And that stuck with me as a good story of how people pleasing can be really destructive and kill even.
yeah. We think it's helpful, but ultimately it's not helping either party.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of finding that balance, like you mentioned, the assertive communication to um, express what you're experiencing in a
Yeah.
healthy way or helpful way or effective way.
Yeah, and it's not easy to tell a superior like they made a mistake, but there's so much on the line sometimes, like in an airplane, companies' profits even, or whatever it is. As a psychologist, I've supervised interns here, and we and used to be my intern many years ago, but there's that tension of being in multiple roles. I'm your supervisor, I'm your teacher, your employer, but I'm also trying to help you become a better therapist. So that always made it seem difficult to me when I was an intern too, is if I tell my boss that I made this potential mistake, they're also evaluating me.
Mm-hmm.
And so then they think less of me as a potential therapist, or I think less of you, for example. So then interns tend to bring me all their victory stories. I helped
Right.
this patient with this one, I said this, and it's great. But how can I help that person become a better therapist if they don't also tell me I may have made a mistake here? I think I said the wrong thing here. The patient got upset when I did this. So I need to also understand when interns made a quote mistake. But I understood that from being there that it's not easy,
Mm-hmm.
especially in a multi-layered relationship like that,
Sure.
you know.
Yeah. The sense of, am I safe to
Mhm.
express my experience fully?
Y-
Uh,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. And so those employees understand that Korean Airlines didn't want to get fired or to get downmarked, like, oh, you're challenging my authority, you're not a good employee. So they were understandably very careful about not sharing mistakes they saw in the airplane.
Mm,
So they had to be given that green light that no, you should. You
right.
should speak up if you see something that's wrong.
It's like ultimately protecting a lot more people rather than,
Right.
yeah.
Right. And so as I think about it, like a good manager or boss can take feedback, can have employees say, no, I don't agree with that, and no, what about this? But one who's too authoritarian rather than authoritative just wants a lot of yes people around them. We used to say yes men, but I think you're supposed to say yes people now.
Uh-huh.
So they want a lot of yes people around them so they don't feel challenged or called out. And so I think better bosses can say you're welcome to disagree with me, and I want to know,
Yeah.
when I've made a mistake. Which is it's not easy to hear always, that your employee saw a mistake you made, but that's ultimately for everyone's benefit.
Right.
Yeah.
For everyone's like growth as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be really challenging for like someone who has people pleasing tendencies to start to shift those
Mhm.
behaviors as well, because it could be so scary to think about. Okay, well, what happens if I start saying no? Will
Right.
I lose connections? Will people no longer want to be around me? Will I
Right.
be rejected or abandoned?
More risky.
Mhm.
Do you know, I don't think I've ever told you this. When I was an intern, it was maybe my second year, and I had a supervisor, and the feedback I got at the end of the year, they said, "You were good, fine, but you a little piece of advice, you could kiss up a bit more."
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah. And I was kind of taken aback. I mean, obviously, I remember it many years later. So it made an impression on me because as an intern, there's sort of like this unspoken thing in our field. I think that you are supposed to be very deferential, which to an extent, I understand that too. There's something about paying your dues and giving that respect to people who are licensed and in the field much longer than you and should have more experience and wisdom. So, there is that like very narrow range then for let's say an intern psychotherapist to speak up, but there's also like an expectation that they're going to defer
Yeah.
to an extent too. So the next experience that just came to me that I want to go to you is I was a postdoctoral intern, so this was several years later. I had my doctorate. I was working in an eating disorder clinic, and I was working next to a group therapist who was a lot older and more experienced than me, licensed many years. And his line of questioning kind of crossed the line. It did cross the line with one of the female patients, and I don't even remember what he said or how bad it was, but the our everybody's boss, the owner of this practice, really came down on me hard for not squelching that conversation or redirecting it.
Mhm.
And I was a little bit like those Korean employees before they had been given the green light. I thought, this guy's 25 years older than me. He's a licensed psychologist. He's doing a line of questioning. I didn't know that I have the authority to say, let's shift it to another
Right.
topic.
Jump in.
Yeah. But I mean, they made a good point that I probably should have if something felt off to me. But that, yeah, I was one of the ways of surviving grad school and all those supervisors is being deferential.
Mhm.
So it was a bit of a mind shift for him, but it was probably a good experience to have, even if at the time it was a bit like, whoa, I did something wrong. He was the one who crossed the line, you
Right.
know?
Sure. No, that's really interesting. It's again, it's like finding that balance or kind of just knowing. And I think it can, like you said, there's so many layers there, so it can be hard to know when it's okay to jump in or when it's
Mm.
actually appreciated.
Hmm.
Um, but I think as you were talking about that, I was thinking about the idea of getting more in touch with um, like our beliefs or values or authenticity and feeling um, like it's okay to jump in because it's important to us
Right.
and I think that's something that we could certainly help. I mean, people who are struggling with some of these people pleasing tendencies
Yeah.
um, can benefit from in terms of developing that a better relationship with the self. Like, who am I? What do I want? What do I value?
Hmm.
Um,
Well, ultimately, as I just thought about it, some more is there is a parallel with the Korean Airlines.
mm,
You're putting people's lives at risk if you don't speak up to the boss. And so we
mm,
were working with very acute eating disorder patients. So if he's crossing a line that's hurting them, then I do have a responsibility to say, hey, we should shift the conversation. I think you're crossing a line
right.
because patient care has to come before my standing with this elder psychologist.
Mhm.
So I think in that sense, they were right that I should have taken that risk, even though I didn't feel empowered to do it, just like those Korean employees thought they were being good by being, careful and quiet.
Right.
So, yeah. The other thing I was thinking about, Trina, was do you know which ethnic group is the most successful in our country socioeconomically?
Not off the top of my head.
It happens to be Asians.
Mm,
Asians are the richest group in our country. So,
okay.
and then I think it might be white.
Mhm.
So then we have to ask why. And obviously, there's positive things in the culture like hard work, focus on education, family, and stuff like that. But maybe part of it is people pleasing, or put a different way, respecting authority, which can be useful.
Mm.
You know, if you respect your teachers and your bosses, I mean, they're not going to promote the people who are disrespectful to them. You
Sure,
know,
it's like
and so,
finding that again, that balance
yeah,
of like survival and being respectful, but also kind of feeling um, like I guess true to oneself in terms of how they're moving through the world. But I guess
yeah,
in relation to success, that's interesting.
yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. Hmm.
So yeah,
Good
there's an adaptive
combination.
quality. There's an adaptive quality to it. And what I talk about patients sometimes is, how has this become maladaptive for you?
Mm.
You know, whatever trait it is, or how does it work and how it doesn't work. And so I also think about agreeableness versus disagreeability, which we've kind of touched on.
Yeah.
And agreeable people are more cooperative, polite, pleasant,
Hmm.
and disagreeable people obviously are not. They're okay with, if your feelings are hurt, they're okay with disagreeing, obviously, and not being polite. So sometimes it takes a certain amount of disagreeability, for example, to be a good manager.
Hmm.
Like, you know, when I had more, I was doing more intern supervision. I had 6 or 7 people. I had to make a lot of quick decisions throughout the day, and I couldn't worry as much about, you know, if I corrected this intern about that, if it didn't land perfectly and their
Hmm.
feelings stung a little bit, I just say, I think you should do that. I think you should do that. And it was just the nature of being a busy manager to do my job well. And so I had to tap into a little bit of my disagreeable side, where I could detach a little bit, where the agreeable person or the people pleaser wants to make sure that person feels good about what they said.
Hmm.
You know, so it's an interesting kind of dichotomy. And you know, therapists do tend to be more agreeable. I mean, it makes
Hmm.
sense. But CEOs tend to be a little bit more disagreeable. So I was kind of doing both, you know,
Hmm.
and tapping into both sides, which I actually enjoyed, because I like the challenge of using different muscles in my brain. And I have both in me, you know, because maybe I've done my own work
Right.
of being a patient for a number of years.
Hmm.
But you know, I was raised more on the people pleasing side, as we've been saying, to adapt.
Yeah.
I had to learn my assertive, disagreeable side.
Hmm. And I think it's interesting to kind of just discover all those different parts of the self, because I think we all have that and we're
Mm-hmm.
really um, kind of embracing all parts, I guess.
Mm.
And I suppose also thinking about, are we being agreeable? Again, going back to, are we being agreeable because we're trying to um, avoid adding to someone's kind of suffering, or just trying to keep the peace?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it kind of something that feels like intentional and kind of aligned with what we believe in or value?
Mm-hmm.
And similarly with being disagreeable, are we doing it because of ego, or just because,
Mm-hmm.
or is it something that's actually helping the team ultimately, or
Right.
are we kind of standing up for people, for example, like at the eating disorder clinic?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, as I think about it, I think a good therapist also needs some disagreeability, because let's say you're my patient and I have to give you an interpretation that you don't like.
Mhm.
It might sting about some of your behavior, or something I see.
Yeah.
And so if I'm only agreeing with everything you say and only want you to feel good for 45 minutes, I can't say, well, let's take a look at what you did in that situation. I think that's worth looking at. I don't know about that. Kind of questioning something you did or said,
Mm.
and examining it and saying, maybe that's from childhood when you did that or that happened to you. So sometimes if I make an interpretation, it may not land wonderfully
Yeah.
at first. It's hard to hear
Mm.
sometimes our truths from another person's perspective sometimes. And it's not my goal to poke or sting people, but and I try to wait until we have enough of a relationship where the person can hear it. But sometimes an interpretation needs to be said to help the person.
Completely,
You
yeah.
know?
Just can be a bit of a challenge, or at least kind of helping someone hear the hard truths, or even if they're not ready to hear. I mean, yes, it is about, like you said, developing the rapport and
Yeah.
sometimes kind of meeting them where they're, well, not sometimes, but meeting them where they're at, and kind of finding those spaces to um, kind of share that when they're likely able to take it in. But
Yeah,
I think growth is not always comfortable, and
that's right.
it's important to, like you said, be disagreeable at times, and when it's
Yeah.
helpful for the client's journey and healing.
Like my first job as a licensed psychologist, I worked in max security prisons.
Mhm.
And so you're trying to help them in a way by having them not have these bad behaviors that landed them in prison and hurt other people. And so you have to say, look, when you get angry, I understand that, but when you punch somebody, that's really bad because it lands you in prison. You hurt somebody, you may feel guilt. If it, I mean, the toughest one I think for a lot of us was working with pedophiles because it's like you hurt kids, and so if they're like, yeah, I'm thinking about hurting a kid, you're not like so coddling, like, oh, I understand that, you're having these. You're like, okay, you're having these feelings. The important thing, is that you don't act on them. That's really
Mhm.
important,
Mhm.
and so, but you have a lot of us had kind of transference, like, wow, they're having these rather vile desires to harm children.
Right.
And so it's not like we are all excited about them sharing that, but
Mhm.
it's better that they share it so we can hopefully prevent bad behavior.
Yeah.
So that was a lot of the work, was start with preventing bad behavior,
Mhm.
normalizing some of it. Like everybody gets angry. It's
Mhm.
just, I don't punch my boss, or I
Right.
don't, stab anybody, but I'm human, so I've experienced anger and rage,
Mhm.
just like you. So I would try to do that, but I learned that, yeah, you have to kind of say no, and they're also pushing the boundaries because they're trying to get certain needs met, and sometimes you have to say no, I can't, put you in that group, you wouldn't fit, and so you have to say no to, the patient, which is good practice, too. And also they needed a lot of empathy, and so it was also rewarding because that's the traditional therapist, like, why we went into is like understanding somebody's experience and empathizing with them, put yourself in their shoes. What if I was stuck in that cell? It must be horribly difficult,
Yeah.
regardless of what the person did to get in there. They're in this really bad bind
Mhm.
that's unnatural for a human to be in, a cell all day. So anyway, any thoughts on giving feedback that's challenging? Or I remember with you, you would say sure to patients too much in the very beginning. I mean, you've been with me for 9 years or something like that. In the beginning, you would say sure. I thought almost too quick. You were agreeing with the
Mhm.
patient because I saw you as pretty agreeable, and we worked on. If you remember, like, you don't have to say agree right away. Just let the story unfold. Maybe you don't agree with all of it or
Mhm.
all of how they did it.
Mhm.
So
Well,
I know it's a little challenging because you were my intern and now you're not.
I
But
mean, we've been through the
yeah,
journey together,
yeah,
and it's been
that was a long time ago too.
yeah, it's been like definitely a great learning experience, and definitely so much growth in the process.
You have, yeah, but yeah,
It's been yeah, I think as you were talking about that, it made me think of just taking the pause
the pause is huge.
and not being so quick to, whether it's say sure or say yes in any situation when someone's asking, either like expressing something or asking for something, and just taking that pause and taking a step back so that there's a consciousness of, okay, what do I want or need? What does the other person want or need? And like, what is a kind of authentic response?
Yeah, the
Um,
pause is huge. I thought of that earlier in our conversation. I forgot to mention it, so I'm glad
mm,
you brought that up again, because people pleasing can be quick to agree to something that maybe you didn't want to agree to or maybe needed to think about.
yeah. And
So
then
I'm
at the
glad you
end of the
brought that.
day, it's like, oh, what did I say? Yes, I just said yes
Yeah.
to everything.
Right. I
What did
didn't
I do?
even say no to an immediate answer. Like,
Mm,
I don't have to answer that right away. Well, I'll have to take my time and see if that works.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's about time, I think. Anything else before we close out that you want to end with or promote or?
Um, I mean, I think there's so much, I mean, such a complex topic,
Yeah.
and something that's certainly very relatable, um, and it's probably, yeah, a lot more to say about it. We could do a part two perhaps.
Yeah.
But I think it's just having that awareness, and um, helping. I think helping people who kind of struggle with these tendencies to really get more in touch with what feels like aligned with my values or beliefs, or what feels
Right.
authentic to me, and how can I gradually, um, whether it sets better boundaries that are aligned in a way that, um, it's sort of like building that new muscle, right? It's kind of gradually kind of feeling comfortable doing
Yeah.
that. And yeah.
Okay. Well, by the way, I also think the other extreme is people who are too disagreeable or
Hmm.
antisocial, kind of like the inmates I was just describing. They kind of would hurt people or do whatever they felt like doing. And you have to teach certain people like that to be more agreeable, to get along better, to be more people pleasers, and
Right.
to be more pro-social.
Hmm.
And so you don't get as many of those, I think, in psychotherapy practice. Either they're not um, wanting to get therapy, or they're just not in that world. But um, most people I see lean towards the other side in psychotherapy. Not all.
Hmm.
Sometimes you get somebody who needs to learn to get along better and think of others more.
Right.
So, anyways,
Yeah.
well, I think that's about it for me, Trina.
Well, thank you for having me. That was yeah, I appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, it was great to have you and talk about this. So we hope you guys got something out of it and can work on your assertiveness skills if you have trouble with that, your I statements. And this is the Dr. Michael J. Whitman uh, psychotherapy private practice, and the podcast, of course, The Shrink in Beverly Hills. Take care. Bye bye.